Thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to introduce our guest. His name is Michael Ray. He is with Smile Project Louisville, and he is the reason many people smile today. Let's talk about Michael. Let's hear what it's all about. It's very exciting. Thank you for being here, Michael.
Well, thank you for having me. I often say I'm grateful and blessed because it's a two-way street, and it starts with you. And thank you for bringing me into your world today. So thank you. I'm grateful.
I'd like to start from the beginning. So, my question: what made you smile when you were a kid?
When I was a kid, wow. It's funny. We talked for a hot second, and I have not been asked that question, but I think it probably kind of goes into where I'm in life right now. And I think more often than not, as a kid, we smile because of the relationships that we have in our life that are formed, whether it's with our parents, grandparents, siblings. I'm the oldest of seven kids. So probably more often than not, it was my interaction with my family that brought me the greatest joy as a child.
Yeah, that was my next question. What brought you joy? Joy in the family. What was your happiest moments when you're, I don't know, 5, 6 years old? Is it baseball field? Is it an
I
ice
think
cream parlor?
it's probably some of my happiest moments. So it's interesting that you said 5, 6 years old because I was born in Louisville, Kentucky, but not raised here. So I was legitimately, I think, in between 5 and 6 years old. So I was born in '69, and in '74 we navigated to Cleveland, Ohio, and for me, I think early in life, being really close to my extended family. Had a very close relationship with my grandparents and aunts and uncles. I can vividly still remember in those early years, 5, 6, 7, navigating back from Cleveland to Louisville, Kentucky to visit people who I was close with. And I look back to those years in which it's fascinating, having that many siblings. I was close, but not crazy close to my parents, but I was insanely close to my grandparents. So those younger years, I don't know what the math is, 5, 6, 7, 8. I can vividly remember taking those trips from Cleveland back to Louisville to visit my grandparents and how meaningful, that time was, to the point where, and I really haven't shared this a lot publicly too, my first year of college, I actually moved back from Cleveland to Louisville and lived with my grandparents. That was the kind of the relationship that I had with my extended family and my grandparents, that they meant enough to me that I actually, as a young man at 18, wanted to live with them.
That's incredible. What is the memory? What made grandparents special? Period. But is there any certain memory or
You know,
event?
Well, yeah. I mean, is there one singular memory? It's probably really hard, but I do remember a few things, and I would tell you it's probably twofold. So when I say twofold, I'll give you a singular memory and then just an overall. But the singular memory, I can vividly remember in 1977 when the movie Smokey and the Bandit came out, and my grandparents took me to the drive-in, and sitting in their Gran Torino and watching. But that kind of segues into that second piece, in which a lot of laughter, a lot of time spent together in just the simplicity of life in small moments that make you, laugh. I mean, to me, laughter is just a crazier version of smiling, a little bit more joy into the occasion. And I think that with my grandparents, beyond that, going as an 8-year-old kid to Smokey and the Bandit, and feeling how much joy and laughter that my grandparents had, I always have those memories with them, that it seems like we were always just laughing about things, in life. And I think a lot of times, if we can remove the stress and anxiety that sometimes we feel day in and day out, regardless of what someone's going through, and just enjoy the moments and what joy that does and can bring to us.
That's incredible. Yeah, laughter is a medicine. It's scientifically proven.
It's scientific. Yes, 100%. It's medicinal. I say it all the time. It's medicinal.
What was the dream of Michael? as a young boy
What was
or
a dream?
18-year-old? Did you have a dream?
I did. It's fascinating. So I don't expect you or anybody else to know the movie Jerry Maguire.
Oh, yeah, I love this movie.
Okay. So
Absolutely love this movie.
literally, and it's funny because recently, when I say recently, in the last couple of years, I was given some letters that I had written. So my grandmother 3 years ago had passed away at the age of 99. 99 and a half, and she still had some letters. So my grandmother had five kids, of course, one being my mother. My uncle, who was my godfather, had passed away at a relatively earlier age, 61 years old, of cancer. And in now answering your question, I was given these letters that my grandmother had, and I had wrote a letter to my uncle, who was an attorney. And this letter I had written, I think I was 16, 17 years old. I was in high school, and I was sharing with him my dreams and hopes and aspirations of becoming. And the reason why I said Jerry Maguire is I wanted to be a sports attorney or agent. I wanted to work with athletes, and of course, this letter was written in the mid 80s. And then, I go away to college and navigating, and it was 10 years before anything like Jerry Maguire had ever, hit the big screen to kind of showcase us what a sports agent was. But again, I wanted to be a sports attorney and an agent.
Did you follow that dream early on in your career?
So
No, you've
early
been a
on,
mortgage, but
so
I
the answer to that early on was yes. I actually did in the summers of 90 90. I did some internships with two different sports agents, and I kind of worked behind the scenes, and I did some recruiting and some things here locally for them. And probably, as a lot of people do, that's where I wanted to be. And then I graduated from the University of Louisville, and I struggled to get into that industry. And I made a decision based upon a college friend that I had a relationship with that got into, of all things, the mortgage industry. And I kind of at the time gave up, going, okay, my path in life is going to be different. It's not going to be sports. I got to pay the bills. I'm getting married. I'm starting a family. And I segued into doing sales in the mortgage industry.
looking back at that time when you segued into mortgage industry, would you, knowing what you know today, would you like to go into sports management?
I look back, and it's funny because I tell people a lot of times I don't live with any regret. But if I could go back and do things differently, I probably would have been a little bit more patient. I would have persevered a little bit more. I probably would have done a little bit more side hustling and things to continue to pursue that passion and love that I had for. It wasn't just athletics, but it was working within people, with people within the industry. So I probably would do it a little bit differently and would have waited it out a little bit more. I think looking back at that time, it was about 9 months, 9, 10 months between graduating and really going into my first role, professionally speaking. And honestly, I was waiting on tables in a restaurant, as I was trying to crack into and being an agent. And that's kind of one of those situations in which it's really challenging when you're young. And in those cases when you're 22, 23 years old and you're trying to lay a foundation for a professional athlete that's also the same age. And again, different day and time too. I don't want to say it's any easier now, but obviously the world was dramatically different, 30 plus years ago than it is today.
It feels like that you're very relationship oriented gentleman, and that I believe the mortgage has a lot in common with that in terms of building relationship. Is that
You hit the
true?
nail on the head, and a lot of times when people asked me, and of course, this is well before I started doing any of this, but when people asked me what made me successful in sales, it really came back down to, and you're kind of getting that theme now, and that is I just loved people. And I kind of found the ability that if people could, if they liked you and then they trusted you, a lot of times they found ways to buy from you regardless of whatever you're selling, be it a product or service. There's something about that. So for me, the relationship aspect was a huge component, regardless, because I often look back at the time, and I spent about 20 years in the mortgage industry. Nothing really with the mortgage industry ever fascinated me. I can't really ever say that I was totally in love with it, but yet I did love the people that I worked with, those relationships. And it was kind of twofold because, a lot of people dismiss, but you have relationships with people that you work with internally within your company that you navigate, the process of whatever you're doing, in my case, sales. And then you have those people externally that you build relationships with. And that's really the true staying power of being able to sustain success long term. And I'm grateful and blessed to say that the industry, in the mortgage industry, I had clients that I worked with for years.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as transactional. I mean, it could be in some cases, but it wasn't as transactional to where you were making an individual sale and you're moving on to the next person. Those transactions were with customers that I had relationships in a lot of cases for a long time.
Right. What do you think made you successful aside from building relationship? What qualities you brought in? I mean, you don't seem
Yeah,
like a
I
typical
mean,
mortgage guy. It's more cut and dry kind of thing.
of course.
You stand out. Seems, if I would come to you, discuss a mortgage, I think I'll have a totally different conversation. We will talk about anything. But
And that's a fascinating question because at the end of the day, kind of going back to the mortgage industry again, I used to think about that a lot. And again, I used to talk to people about it. And that was, if you had five different people that are all offering the same product or service at the same price, how do people make decisions? And I think a lot of times people make decisions based on emotions. I am an emotional seller. I try to tap into to people's personalities and really move the needle emotionally to where, again, given a choice between, if all things are being equal, well, why are they going to make a choice to do business with Michael Ray? Where did that come from? I think there's different facets of that. I say that because, things like integrity and honesty came from my father. My father worked for the FBI. I kind of position it a little differently now because some people don't hold the FBI in the same light. But my father worked, for the FBI from 66 to 98. And a little bit different day and time. But again, obviously, the FBI, a lot of times when you think about it, there is that level of integrity and honesty in which, um, I'm very transparent. I'm authentic. I don't bullshit people. I just tell people like it is. And I think people find a way to respect that when sometimes telling the truth is not easy. But as my dad used to say, again, the truth will set you free. So I think those values of integrity and honesty, kind of set a foundation with any relationship. From there, I'm a high extrovert, so I think I'm socially capable with that wiring that I have. And I got that from a couple of my uncles. Truly, they, again, I talk about my extended family, and a couple of my uncles were in that same space. So I found a way to be charming and witty and playful with people, again, trying to bring the best out in every situation. So I think in kind of capturing those things, regardless, the instrument I say was mortgages, but regardless of what I was going to sell. And I've been in a few sales roles where I have struggled, and I know where the disconnect was. If I don't really have the ability to kind of sell cradle to grave, because again, I'm cultivating relationships. I struggle a little bit. I struggled a little bit more with inside sales because if I don't have the ability to see and be in your space to kind of again feel your energy and in your vibe, I've struggled with that a little bit. So I know where I excel, with people. It's probably no different when I've done some public speaking. And doing it on Zoom is cool, but it doesn't provide the same energy and
energy
impact
of the
as
people.
I'm physically in the room with you. you can feel it a little bit differently. So being in outside sales and being in front of people and then taking kind of what my upbringing, nurtured me, along, I think has kind of given me some intangibles that some other people don't have.
Who or what event may influence you the most as a young man?
But as a young man, I probably can't look back on any singular moments, but navigating into young adult life, I mean, there were multiple moments, one of which, being the parent of a child with special needs, that can have a profound impact. Being, a young parent in losing a child can have a profound impact. So those are things that, as a rewind through my life within the last 20 to 30 years, that I've kind of gone through, that have kind of shaped the man I am today, because I would sit here and tell you I'm nowhere near the same man that I was 20, 30 years ago. Now there's certain elements that have not changed. We've talked about some of those things that have shaped me as a man, but yet I would sit here and tell you that I've evolved, because life's experiences can do that. And I think in certain times in that journey in life, we want to play the comparison game, and I'm no different. And I used to look at those events and go, why me? Rather than understanding and embracing and creating real positive change from those life, again, very dramatic life experiences. And I've often talked about it a little bit too, in which, there's life experiences that we can evolve when we've made choices. And again, I'm not trying to separate or diminish those two. So if anyone listening, please. But, in my family, again, being the oldest of seven siblings, a choice is, I've got a brother that's 10 years younger than me that battled really, really bad substance problems, in and out of jail and a little bit of prison. And I would sit here and tell you most of that were choices. He made the wrong choices. Now he's turned his life around and evolved from that. But again, those are choices that we're making as human beings that sometimes can never negatively impact you in your relationships. I didn't have a choice on having a daughter with Down syndrome. I didn't have a choice on losing a son. But again, those things, we can make choices to whether or not they impact our relationships. And at one time in my life, they negatively impact in how I chose to live my life, versus looking at, okay, maybe there is some really good and beautiful positive things that can come from such challenging times.
How do you process that? Something like that, that's not your choice, but it's really difficult circumstance of your life. What do you tell yourself in the morning, and how do you process that? What's your way?
It's
You
fascinating.
have
That
therapy, or maybe you circle of friends. What is your how do you process yourself?
Yeah, I think it's a circle of things. It's funny because I said something a couple of years ago to my daughter that really resonated with her. And when I say it resonated, because when you talk about now when you wake up in the morning, I mean, how do you position our minds and things? And what I said to her, and where it was so profound for her, is that she goes, "Wait, Dad, repeat that." And I said, I don't have bad days, I have bad moments, because I don't allow those moments to control me, to control my day, to where then it controls the next day and the next day. And I think that's when, and I've been there. So when we talk about allowing those to compound, to where day in and day out, week in and week out, month in and month out, can then lead to months and years of being in a really dark place. And I've been there, too. So for me, again, I don't allow those moments to control me, to have bad days, bad weeks, bad months. A lot of it now starts with faith. It starts, again, of a mindset of understanding. But I do rewind into that authenticity and transparency. I tell people, when it was really dark for me, I waited too long to get help, to get professional help, to speak, to understand my thoughts and feelings and what I was living with. And when I talk about dark places for me, I mean, I had a couple of moments in life that I wanted to mail it in, that I did not feel like my life had purpose, it had no meaning, it had no value, and very, very serious considerations to ending my life. Would tell you again, I go back to faith, because faith kind of, I think that journey led me to get help. For me, for a period of time, it was antidepressants, but that was a part of my journey that I ended as well. That I took antidepressants for about 9 years, and then I got to a point going, no, I'm on the other side. No, I don't need to be controlled by these anymore, and I did the right things to kind of wean off. So now where I am grounded again is that I'm not controlled, because I don't still live a perfect life to where things don't go sideways and have problems and challenges and issues. And granted, sometimes the magnitude can change, but I sit here and would tell you, when I lost my son roughly 19 years ago, I would do it a whole lot differently today than I did back then. Because those were some of the things that controlled me, that allowed me to impact my marriage, my relationships. My marriage failed. I was broken personally and professionally. So I do look at it today going, I could handle those things today a lot differently. Doesn't mean that I wouldn't feel, again, if I lost another loved one, that I wouldn't feel profound sadness. But I uttered something a few years ago for me that is kind of the antithesis of what I'm speaking to, and that is, we smile because at times life is still hard and it's not easy. It's choice, to smile through adversity. It's really a mindset of how I've looked at things in life, and again, I talk about the loss of my son, but having a relationship with somebody that has special needs and is on that, if you want to call it a spectrum, that's probably on the lower end of her intellectual abilities, rather than looking at those challenges as being, a hindrance in our day-to-day activities. It's normalcy for me now, and I look at all the beautiful things. So I look at the joy that I get rather than the challenges.
That's great. How many years between when you had Maddie and you lost your son?
So Maddie was born in April of '99, and then I lost my son in July of 26. 2026, July 20. And where the struggle, at that time with my son is my son was an identical twin. So I always had this constant reminder day in and day out of what could have been or what was, because I look at one person and there was always this void. But yeah, so 7 years, and a lot of that with Maddie, early on were a lot of challenges, open heart surgeries, not walking till she was like 4.5 years old, feeding issues, but I look back now at that time, again, this is that mindset thing with gratitude, in which going, God, I really wish I would have done it differently, but it allowed me to evolve, certain aspects of my life that I've lived with so much more purpose.
What did Maddie, the birth of Maddie, teach you when she was
What
born?
did it teach
Or
me?
it evolved maybe over time, the lesson.
Yeah, I mean, at first there was profound loss and grief. It's an interesting thing to kind of think about, because I didn't look at it that way at first until we started talking to other families and parents that had children with Down syndrome. And it's a very common thing, in which when you don't know, and we did not, so we didn't even know the sex of Maddie until she came out. So it's a very profound, humbling moment when you learn, you're in my wife's first birth, my oldest daughter was natural, everything fine. This was going to be, a C-section. So I'm in the OR, and you're seeing all that play out. And I just talked about this recently. I say that because I had not seen an old boss of mine that I had worked with in the late 90s, God, in like 15 years. And I was in Nashville, and I had dinner with him and his wife. And we were talking about this very situation, because the very first phone call I made, I had a unique relationship with my boss, was to him. I was sobbing uncontrollably, because I was trying to process how our lives had just, look, we're not talking about changing because of a newborn. It just radically changed because of the unknown. and you run a lot of those emotions through your mind. And in talking to other parents in those first few weeks, a lot of them talked about the emotions and moving through. It's like loss. It's like all of a sudden you're dealing with this great loss and grief. So yeah, I mean, there was a lot of that in the first few months, and then it was trying to get a grasp and understanding of, okay, what are her challenges going to look like in working through those. But I would tell you, just with that, I mean, I had profound moments with my daughter during COVID in which I would laugh and would be like, "You don't care that you can't go to the grocery store today, or go somewhere without wearing a mask." Those things didn't impact her the same because she, I think, kind of looked at life through a different lens, and that just because she was home day in and day out, and her life was, she didn't perceive her life being turned upside down like we did in trying to process everything, through COVID. I looked at it as going, well, you're just infinitely joy and happy because you're here with your people.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So there were always these constant stepping stones and reminders with her, that I probably did not process. And really, again, I can look at moments in my life, and again, there's that 7 year gap until I lost my son. And I think when it really started to get to the point where I understood it, Mel, I mean, it was 2012, 2013. I mean, so you're talking, at that point, Maddie's 13, 14 years old. I'm 6, 7 years removed from my son. I'm divorced. Personally and professionally, I'm about as broken as you can get, in someone's life, at that point. I say that because I was making 200-300 grand living in a 5,000 square foot house, and I was broke living with my parents. So when I talk about profound times in which you think your life has no value and meaning, and that look, you want to mail it in, I'm asking my dad I need money for my car payment. I'm living back at my parents as a 40-year-old man. It's a lot to kind of process. But then I started kind of revisiting my journey and understanding the things that I lived through and that I was taught. And maybe, you know, I could find the joy out of it.
Do you remember the moment that this?
Well, I mean, I do very vividly remember one moment. Yeah. And I say this because you talk about profound, and again, I don't put my faith on people, but look, I had pulled up in front of, I don't know why it was this part of it, but it was 2014. Again, what I was doing in life, I was delivering pizzas as a 40-year-old man. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I look back in where I was in life, and I had pulled up in front of St. Aloysius Chapel. So they had a newer church and they had a really old church that was over 100 years old. And I laugh about it now, but when you talk about profound, I had pulled up in front of that church. I had sat out inside of my car for about an hour, actively weeping because I knew that was going to be the night. I just couldn't do it anymore. And I look back, and where I say I laugh about it is I never had the intestinal fortitude to go inside the church. I wanted to. I pulled up with the intent to go into church and to pray, and I sat in my car crying, going, "This is it. I'm gonna go home, mail it in." And I could sit there and tell you, Mel, that I vividly recall the voice of God. This is not it. It was almost as if I felt it was the beginning, that your life from here on out is going to change, and I have big plans for you. Stay with me. You know, and I look back at that time and where it was profound, and Smile Project Louisville didn't start for another 4 years, but I could tell you I started living with more purpose. I started doing things differently in what I consumed. I knew that my vehicle, my drug of choice was sugar. I was a sugar addict. Again, I talk about moments of clarity and laughing and things in which I go, I thank God it was never alcohol or drugs, but sugar is a drug, and that was my vehicle to comfort me, and I knew that it was a problem. So I started dealing with things. That's when I really got actively involved in therapy. For the first time, again, I talk about, my son in 2006, my marriage had failed, and never really until we did a little bit of marriage counseling, but that was trying to save the marriage, not trying to fix me. So yeah, there was a very profound moment in 2014, in front of that church, to where I know that I was going to choose a different course, that I also feared for me taking my life was going to be the most selfish act that any human being could do. I started feeling the profound sadness of my children losing their father, and I feared hell. I feared, hell for me, that if I chose that, I understood what eternity was, and I'm like, no, it can't end this way. But also it's no different, when you're going to make a choice. Sometimes those choices are hard, and we expect instant results, and it's not that easy. So, but it's a pattern of behavior in starting to make different choices that again kind of compound to where I could start seeing those choices making a difference, and I was making improvements in my life that other people in my life started to see and feel too.
Have you been to this particular church since?
I
Or was it
have.
a rendo or was it a
I
family
have.
church? Okay.
I'm sorry?
Was it a church that you
No, I mean literally where it is, it's not even a 5-minute drive from my house. I've driven
okay.
by that. I've driven by there. When I say 1,000 times, I'm not making that up.
Okay.
And again, where it's unique, so I live on the outskirts of Louisville, almost to where the next county. So I'm not far. When I say not far, I can drive about 10 minutes and I'm in a cow pasture. But I can also drive 5 minutes. I'm at a grocery store. I'm at 10 minutes to Target. So I'm kind of on that Mendoza line there. That church was profound because that's where my son's funeral was. But again, I give you those elements because for a long time they call it the chapel, was a very small church that it was built in 1890, to where that's where people out in this area just went to church years ago, and it served as the primary church until they built the new church. I think in 95ish, 97, somewhere around there, they built the new more modern church. So but I guess because of my upbringing again, um I was always exposed to really just older churches, and I had a love for older churches. So for me that day, again, the intent was to go into the church, and I have since driven by it, gone in, all of those things. I have gone back and done a few videos in front of the church and talking about how profound and how much that specific structure and my faith had meant to me when I have spoken publicly. I often, when I speak publicly and talk about stories and different things, I often share images. And I do, I have an image of me in front of that church with my daughter, Maddie, who has Down syndrome. And I often talk about her and that church saving my life.
It's incredible. Tell me what happened between that pivotal moment, that profound moment, you whipping the car in front of this old chapel, old church, and you're going for chili on a cold night and the Wendy's drive-through. How many, was it 4 years? I understand 4 years later you.
I don't know exactly, but I do know that moment was in 2014. Again, I know I was delivering pizzas. I can't remember if it was February or even August, but I do know it was 2014 because I know that period of time that was very dark. I delivered pizzas for a year and a half, in 2013 and 2014. But, yeah, but I do vividly remember
Chantal.
being with Wendy's. So for me, what you said evening, but it was a cool February morning, into where I was in the office and I was, as we all do as we go about our days, I was going, what am I having for lunch? I was like, oh, God, today would be perfect for some chili. And I loved Wendy's chili, and it's no different. I don't even live right now 6-7 minutes from that Wendy's, but I chose to go there. But in that period of time, in that 4 years, I would sit here and tell you, therapy was a big part because I went for about 2.5 years of therapy where it started once a week. And as in anything, kind of evolved into going a couple of times a month and once a month. And when I talk about that point, when antidepressants, I mean, when I was on the back end, I was like, okay, I had taken these pills now for 9 years. I was ready to be done. So there was therapy. I was consuming a lot of material. I mean, two people that made a profound impact on me were of all things were Gary Vaynerchuk and a speaker author by the name of John Gordon. He put out a lot of positive. Gary V was more about talking about kindness and authenticity and just embracing who you are and how amazing and beautiful you are and what you bring to the world. And John, was kind of this infectious, contagious piece of positivity, and regardless of your circumstances and how we looked at life, and it started bringing more daily reflection of Maddie and the journey with her, and the impact of losing my son, and then looking at my son who was living, a little bit differently. So I look at that entire time and go, I think I knew how profound and life changing a singular moment of a Wendy's drive through was that. Now, that it didn't mean anything was born as far as Smile Project Louisville, but I understood the magnitude of the moment, Mel, in which I pulled over and parked my car and I broke down in tears because here I was having a bad moment or a bad morning at the office. And just in a singular moment of a drive through, someone changed the whole trajectory of my day. And they didn't do anything really different. Again, we have these interactions everywhere, but yet I would sit there and tell you it's 7.5 years later, and I can play it out of my mind, and I can feel those same emotions today. But for me, I pulled over. I had another God moment. I felt God speaking to me, and I'm like, "What are you telling me? Why is this moment with Chantrell that important?" But I got out of the car, and look, this is highly taboo, and people don't do this. But I got out of my car knowing that I walked back up to the drive-through window to thank that girl. And when you do that at a drive-through, the first interaction is, "What is wrong, sir?" But nothing was wrong, and I don't know why, but I felt moved. And again, I think truly it was just being guided by faith and the Holy Spirit, and that I asked to take a picture with her. But when I did, it gave me the ability then to allow that to marinate, and over the next several days to reflect on what that short 45-second interaction in the drive-through window meant. And I felt such joy.
I know you don't remember what Chantrell said.
I don't.
What
Yeah.
if you would explain how does she made you feel? What was that
So
that
it's
made you feel
fascinating.
you a chili through drive-through? How do you go from getting your chili to having this? What was that feeling? If you can, if I know it's
So
hard
I'm
to
gonna
explain.
I'm gonna answer that with two things. So the first piece is positive energy is no different than negative energy, and how we feel that and how we react. And again, you've heard me say a few times now, choices. Okay, we can make choices in life. So if I am now driving back to the same Wendy's, but let's say someone cuts me off, practically runs into me, I have a choice and how I want to interact in that moment. I could be an asshat and push back, and now that's a choice, and I could get pushback from the other person to where that escalates. That's that negative energy. So the second piece I would tell you, and I did not hear this quote from Maya Angelou. I mean, looking back, I would tell you, I want to say it was sometime in 2020. If it was the latter part of 2020, 2021, when someone, same situation, I was on a podcast and they said, "Hey, do you know who Maya Angelou is?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah," but I did not know much of her work and the things that she had written and said. And someone had said, and this is the profoundness of the interaction with Chantrell. And Maya Angelou said, "People will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they won't forget how you made them feel." So I can't sit here and tell you today what she said or what she did, but I can still tell you how she made me feel, because I can still vividly remember 7.5 years later, just the energy that was transferred from a drive-through window was vibrant, was loving, was kind, was witty, was charming, was all of those things, that it touched my heart and soul, that it moved me to tears.
And I know you went back to look for Chantrell. You were not able to connect with her.
You did your homework. I did
Okay.
because in that moment, Smile Project Louisville wasn't born, But change was continuing to happen as I continued to evolve to where I understood. And I don't know, again, I look back and laugh and go, why in the hell did I take a picture? But that's where that started. And I started taking pictures with random strangers for a year and a half, and then when it kind of got beyond that in late 2019 into 2020, I really did understand. And that's why, so in late 2019 was the first time I tried to go back to Wendy's. I mean, even to the point where I literally not only had conversations with the manager of that restaurant, but upper management in trying to find that girl. And the last they had known, she had moved out of state into Tennessee. And the only way, so I actually went back that day after trying to navigate, because as things evolved with Smile Project Louisville, I was wanting to, again, find that place to help her understand how impactful it was for me and what it meant, not only for me, but then now how it was touching the lives of so many others. And I was able to never find her, but I did something for one of the managers who was going through some things in life and who had a son that was battling substance abuse and was in and out of rehab and jail. And I did something but yeah, I tried to find her for a good 6 weeks.
Smile Project Louisville. What did you start with? I know I've read a lot, I've watched a lot, but I'd love to hear from you. Did you wake up just one day, said, okay, I'm gonna get some balloons and show up at
No,
the
so
hospital?
it took.
And what was your first?
Yeah, so it took then, again, when I talk about taking that picture with Sean Trell and I talk about it marinating, over several days and looking at that picture, I don't even know how many times now, I started to then revisit my relationship with Maddie. And where Maddie brought perspective is Maddie is nonverbal. So I often, back then when you ask what kind of took place was Maddie has never said the words, I love you, Dad. But I got the affirmation through the nonverbal communication of
Blowing kisses.
a smile and blowing kisses, because I would sit there and go, do you love Daddy? Well, she could not go back, I love you, Dad. But she would light up with this level of joy, okay, through smiling. So I literally say I had this perfect marriage then because I understood the journey with Maddie and how now an interaction with a complete stranger made me feel good. And that was Sean Trell. And I was like, wow. So where that then started was it was about 3 or 4 days later, after understanding and reflecting and praying and meditating on a lot of that, I took another picture with a complete stranger. And I started taking pictures with complete strangers because I was intersecting with this diverse cross section of people. And I look back at that time, and Mel, it went on for a year and a half and it was just pictures. But I was living in that time where it brought me such great joy that I was just finding these complete strangers. I never knew the who, the where, the what, the when, the why. And it was like, oh my God, I just ran into Mel at the grocery store. And all of a sudden, we just had this really short interaction. And I got people laughing and feeling joyful that I wanted to remember it by pictures. So that went on for the first several months. And I had taken dozens of pictures until my oldest daughter was like, Dad, you need to share. And I wasn't sharing them with anyone. They brought meaning and joy to me. And then I started sharing those pictures to social media because my daughter Hannah was like, Dad, you need to share these with the world. So that even started to evolve because the more that I took pictures, it was like, it wasn't just a random picture. It was, hey, I'm here with Mel today. And then that evolved, and I was like, Mel, tell me something beautiful about yourself that I could share with the world, because I had this growing platform then where people started following me of going, who is this next picture going to be with? To the point where, again, I had taken in a year and a half, I mean, easily over 100 pictures,
Oh.
to where I would tell you, I had another profound moment in life, an epiphany. To me, it's kind of that tap on the soldier, the shoulder from the Holy Spirit going, what if you did a random act of kindness? So then I started thinking and praying and over that, going, well, what would I do? Where would I go? Who would it be? And I thought about it for a couple of weeks, and then I decided to do something. And I went into the inner city of Louisville to a grocery store, and I had my son with me, and I decided to video it. I don't know why, but I guess it was no different than the pictures. Capturing the pictures and video for me always became important because I always could relive the emotion and the joy around that moment in time. But I did something. I did a random act of kindness. I felt the emotion, the love, all that stuff that you do when you talk about doing something for someone that can never repay you. And I felt so alive that it honestly was like a drug. And I was like, when are we going to do the next one? And I did a series of those, I think around 7 or 8, from like August through October. And that's when I started sharing it, that's when, again, that's why I tell people it is so profound when you share these moments, because it started to impact and influence the lives of others, where people started reaching out to me going, how do you find these people? Because people started reaching out to me and telling me the stories of others and that people were going through things in life. And I was like, wait, what? And yeah, so that's when then it started to evolve even more to where, being the reason someone smile, in most cases, it's because people were having a really hard time in life, whether they were battling cancer, loss of loved ones, loss of a job. I mean, the stories now are endless because I have hundreds that I have done. Whether, and I would sit here and tell you now about half of what I've done, I've known people have reached out to me and told me the stories. And then the other half were just totally putting myself in situations where I have no idea, but I just feel that I'm in the right place at the right time and I'm going to find the right people. And then how those people have told me at times what they're going through after I've done something and I never knew who it was. And they're like, yeah, I just had a car accident this morning. So even that journey and wanting to make the world smile, it needed, even though the overwhelming profoundness of never hearing the words "I love you, Dad" from my daughter, it needed to intersect with Sean Trell at a Wendy's drive-thru to understand, to then kind of pushed me along in my journey, in that I wanted to take it to others. And we're only here today because of, I look at the beauty of social media. A lot of people can't stand it. It changed my life. It's changed the lives of countless of other people because I just decided to share these encounters to impact the lives of others. And the number of people that it's humbling, and at times it's moved me to tears, that have privately shared what they're going through and what they've watched and how long they have watched. And they have a level of gratitude. And I'm like, I'm no different than you. I guess I have felt a higher calling, and in a lot of cases, I embrace who I am, and that God has blessed me with the ability to be charming and witty and loving, that, I don't know a stranger, that I can instantly in the moment get someone to feel comfortable and violate their personal space.
Violate personal space. I kept thinking, did any of these over 100 people in the grocery store, anywhere, tell you, go away? I don't want your camera. I don't want a picture.
What's funny
I don't
is
want to take a picture with you. Who are you? Why are you taking my picture?
I have been asked so many questions, and I've honestly been only asked that question a couple of times. And the answer to that is yes. It happened one time. And it's fascinating because around the holidays over the last handful of years, I have dressed up as an elf, and I have gone around, in most cases with Maddie, doing random acts of kindness to total strangers. But during the holidays too, there's also been an influx of people who have reached out to me. And I got asked to go to a girl named Stephanie that worked at Big Lots. And again, I was dressed up as an elf. And as I walked in to go do it, and again, no one has ever known that I've been coming, whether they've told me the story of someone, again, they've never known, but she lit me up, cursed me out. I mean, immediately, and was incredibly standoffish, and we shut it down at that point. I walked outside the Big Lots. I immediately called the person who had told me about Stephanie, and she was going through some hard times at life. We sat there for a second going, okay, how do we figure out to do it? And I tried to go back in, and she wanted no part of it. And I just said, it ain't going to work. And we went back to the car, and I called the girl back, and I said, I sincerely apologize, but she's not having any of this. So I am grateful of all the encounters that I've had. I've truly only had one. And it's funny because I could go to my phone and sit there and tell you that I have over 1,000 videos. I don't know how many thousands of pictures and things that I have on my phone, but I chose to delete that video in the first 15 seconds because I did not want that reminder of how I got treated in the moment, because I did not want to judge her.
And perhaps not you or the elf. Maybe that person was deep enough.
And you know what? And that's right. And that's where a lot of times, again, I would leave with people that, one of the other profound things that Maddie has taught me is she doesn't have the wiring to judge people. And, a lot of times when we judge, we find that place where it's the absence of love, the inability to be kind. We all of a sudden start treating people differently.
Empathy.
So I did not want that reminder from Stephanie at Big Lots because, again, by removing it, I wasn't going to sit there and judge her for 15 seconds when, you know what, a lot of times too, when people would tell me, sometimes they wouldn't go into great detail, and I'm like, that's okay. So I didn't want that reminder, and I did not want to judge Stephanie by one singular moment in which she had a lot going on in life.
Wow, that she didn't believe the Christmas miracle. That's hopefully she overcame what was going on with her.
Exactly.
Tell me about where you want the project to go. Where are you? How are you working the project? How do you make this miracle? How do you make people smile every day now?
A lot of what I started to understand in doing it is, early on, I tried to put some structure around it. And by saying structure, going, okay, we're going to create a nonprofit, we're going to create a board, we're going to do fundraising. And COVID happened. And then I would truly tell you, it took a big dump and it shit the bed, that piece. But what I started to understand is there were a lot of people that it felt like this pay it forward movement, because as they watched what I was doing, it was truly off the simple generosity. And when I say simple, because it didn't take the need for somebody to go, I'm giving you $1,000, go give it away. It was off of, hey, here's $10, here's $20, here's $50. It was all of these small things that people paid it forward to me to then be able to go out. And I would sit there and tell you, Mel, at times that I'm not independently wealthy. I've been through a lot. And I think that people kind of saw that, thinking that I was, that became, their perception was their reality. But there were moments in which somebody would reach out and I'm like, oh dear Lord, how do I find a couple $100 to go do this? And literally within a day, all of a sudden out of nowhere, I got like $200 donations. And I'm like, there it is. It just magically happened to be able to go do it. So where I've often envisioned and where it's kind of gone is, I still have those elements. I don't video them all now. There's a lot of things that I've done, just privately behind the scenes and helping people, because in some cases, what I started to understand, I was giving away $50 and $100 and I'm like, hey, this single mother has 4 kids, and to help her save Christmas, it's not a $50 gift card. It actually might be $300, $400, $500 to help her put presents under the tree, kind of situation. So I started doing a lot of that. I've done a lot of podcasts, and I've started, doing some speaking. I'm speaking in 2 weeks to a group of like 250 people in Vegas.
Wow.
I'm giving a keynote. So it's about now, trying to advance that, as we said earlier, it's I can't remember if I was on camera or not. It's about impacting. So it's not about the 250 people in the room. Of course, yes, I would love emotionally to move all of them. But at the end of the day, if I impact the life of one, it's no different than how Chantrell, because, maybe if I always had Maddie, I don't know if Smile Project Louisville exists. It doesn't mean that I didn't change as a human being and I'm not impacting lives. But what I started to figure out was I used to say, well, I have this organization. I don't have an organization because I don't have a bunch of people around me. I do have my core group of family and friends, but what I say is I've created this platform and movement to inspire others. And that's what speaking now and the ability to get into the room and really what I always wanted to find, and I still to this day, Mel, have not found that yet, is I've wanted to be able to do this full time. I did do it full time where I wasn't making hardly anything and I was side hustling. I did that for about 3 years to the point where I'm like, no, I got to go back and have a full time job. I'll still continue to advance my message, but I still have hopes and dreams and thoughts of, I pray and manifest a lot of, I want to speak. I want to be able to fund this on a bigger level, to then be able to say, well, I have an organization because I have people around me, to help me, um, do this. And where I really thought that was taking off was in 2021 and 22, I traveled because, again, social media impacted the lives of people outside of Louisville. And now I found myself going on these Smile Kindness tours. I went to Florida, Texas, New York, California. I was going all over. And when I say all over, I mean, I was going into states and doing 30, 40, and 50 random acts of kindness to make people smile. People were asking me, their perception was, my God, do you do 2 or 3 of these a day? And I said, no, I do like 1 a week because I don't have the resources to do more. So where I want this to still to this day go is I want to be speaking in front of larger groups. I want to share my story to move other people and how it's impacted me. And where it really resonates in the room, again, is I could sit here and tell you the story about how I did a random act of kindness for Angie. But if I showed you 20 seconds in the emotions, you feel it, differently. Did we lose the signal? Hello? Can you hear me? Can you see me? Mel? Hello? I would leave you with this and kind of where it's really touched people's lives. And the reason why I've shared the video is because we could see, you could be in the market for a new car and you could look all day online. But until you physically go sit in the car and drive it where you could really feel it and fall in love with it, I could sit here again and tell you about Angie. But if you actually saw, we were weeping together and I was hugging her because she had lost her daughter who was 14, had a seizure and died suddenly. That interaction is much different than me telling you, again, you're in the market for a new car rather than going to the car lot. So in my speaking, I've done some locally and things. I've kind of evolved there, in which I used to just talk about my journey and the stories. But when you physically had then evolve in showing people what other people have gone through, it has a profound impact on people.
Have people reach you to do like local chapters, different states, and how would it look like
So did people reach out to me for what? I'm sorry?
to carry on your project in other
Oh,
states? So
dear
what
Lord,
would it look
yes.
like in
Oh,
New
my
York
God,
or
yes.
California or
Yeah,
Alabama?
yeah.
What do you see it might look like if
So
I
the
would?
interesting thing is that there was a period of time, and it really has not happened as much in the last year and a half, but easily for several years, I would get DMs on social media all the time or emails and going, oh my, and I'm not making this up. I'm in Kansas City. I'm in Dallas. I'm in Miami. How do I do what you're doing here? And the fascinating thing is I a lot of times I'm like, I'm not the business guy. I'm the relationship guy. I have no idea how to put structure around that. I did think about things and times in which having these interactions with people and conversations a little bit and scratching the surface would be, can you do what I do? Not to say you can't, but again, I started to, as I evolved and asking questions of people that I was doing random acts of kindness to, I would ask them what made them amazing. Again, that self-love thing and what we bring to the world, and would sit there and tell you, in answering that question to you is I often thought, what made me amazing was the ability to love without judgment. So if I was going to do a random act of kindness where somebody had reached out to me and told me the story of someone, I can't sit here and worry if they're gay or straight, if they voted for Trump. I mean, none of that comes into my mind. Again, this is the whole Matty Moo mentality. So therefore, I would often go, can you do what I do? Because you need that person, and then we need funding. And I guess a lot of times I often went back going, I'm trying to move it forward here with me. How can I worry about scaling it and doing in other cities? But yet that's where some of it came, where I traveled and I did short-term fundraising. Because again, so the power of social media is there were a lot of people on primarily LinkedIn that I had built relationships with that said, hey, if you come here, I'll donate. So it was, I would have to raise money short term. And when I say in doing it, it's like, remind me again, I know you're on the West Coast. Where on the West Coast?
San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay, so yeah, I would reach out to someone when I went into California. So California consisted of San Diego to Bakersfield, but I reached out to like 50 different people from LinkedIn that I was building relationships with. And I'm like, Mel, hey, I'm coming to San Fran. I'm going to be in San Fran these 3 days. Who can we go do something for in your community? And oh, by the way, we're going to do it. But can you help me raise a little bit of money to help fund doing it all? And I did that. And that's where a lot of it then sparked, because people saw me not doing it in Louisville. They saw me doing it in Bakersfield, California. They saw me doing it in Corpus Christi, Texas. They saw me doing it in Key West, Florida. I drove thousands of miles around. But again, this was my drug. I feel so alive making someone, and again, I always took it back, because for me now, a smile is nonverbal, and it's just the simplicity of saying I love you to someone without speaking. And I have done some too in which they don't speak English. And that's okay too, because at the end of the day, just the simplicity of a smile, a hug, and a kind gesture was enough, even though you didn't speak English. But people could still see within a minute and a half interaction of two complete strangers who can't even communicate. I love you.
If we can only clone 49 of you, the science will, will be great.
So
We'll have
it's
a
not that
movement,
easy in which
national
you
movement.
go, how can, so I would sit there and tell you how in San Fran, do you start it to where you just randomly start going up to, and look, when I say most of the time, I've had these conversations with people publicly and privately in which, 99% of what we do in life is never video. It's never shared, because this is how we intentionally live. This is just who I am. And what truly, Mel, one of the greatest compliments I got from some people were when I started meeting people. So imagine me coming out to San Francisco and going out in your community, and we're doing these together. And you would go to me, you're the same person that I've seen online for the last 3 years. I'm like, well, yeah, why not?
Well,
Because again, 99% of being with you an entire day is never videoed. It's just two people interacting and sharing stories and just who we are. And that's what I try to really impress upon people when they feel that level of impact and influence in their life. It's not videoed. And that's the beauty of it, is because when we want to impact the life of another, it's because, again, we've gone to Wendy's or we've gone to Starbucks or we've gone to the grocery store or we're at a ball game. It's all of these things that we do in life in which we interact with so many strangers, but we just are so narrowly focused on, I got a grocery list. I've got, rather than when you talk about living with intention, it's when I'm going through even the self-checkout at Kroger's. It's our local grocery store. And I see the self-checkout lady and I go, Susan, how you doing today, girl? Got a name tag on. But again, or I'm going up to Starbucks and getting my coffee, and then, it's Joe on the other side. What's up, Joe? How's your morning been, brother? Hey, it sucks. Why, man? So it's just those simple things. I'm not having long, drawn out conversations, but, again, it's what a little girl who can't speak taught me through the intersection of Chantrell, because I wanted chili. It's how I live. So that's been impressed upon so many people. And that's why I try to tell people too, just be you. You'll shine because we're all beautiful. So when I ask that question now, when I do a random act of kindness now, I ask people 3 questions. And that first one is, what makes you amazing? And self-reflection in the moment when the camera is going, they're going, oh my God. But again, we all bring something so beautiful to the world. So what do you love about yourself that you share with the world?
What's the other question you asked? It's a
The
three question.
second question, the second question I asked. So for a long time it was just two, and it was that question and this question I'm getting ready to tell you. And the second question was, Mel, what would you consider life's greatest blessing? So you get all of a sudden, and again, when I say this now, and I get to the third question here in a second, but like I said, it evolved to where probably 80% of the time when I've asked these questions, it was just the first two, and then I added one about a year ago that I ask of people. But you get people, and I mean people where I've been in the sand on Venice Beach with homeless people asking these questions. I've asked CEOs, I've asked college coaches, athletic directors of universities the same questions, because the perspective, regardless of where you are in life, no matter how many dollars you have, is again the same term. I think what has repeated itself on this podcast is we talk about the profoundness, and you've asked that. So it's so profound, to hear someone who has nothing tell you, and then someone who has maybe it all, because we think they have it all. The third question is, they say, the best is yet to come. So I get people to focus on what they love about themselves, what they think is life's greatest blessing. What are you really grateful for? And then what are you looking forward to? The best is yet to come. So what is the best that is yet to come for Mel? So you get them to focus on, something in the future. I literally just over the weekend met up with the guy that was in town for a conference. He reached out to me and said, oh my God, I'm coming to Louisville. How can I not reach out and meet the Michael Ray? Like, come on, brother. So I met up with him, and I did I shared it this morning on LinkedIn. A dude that I had no idea who he was, who has said he's followed me. He doesn't know how long. He knows it's been years. And I asked him those 3 questions just so to share with the world, just some random Joe, Drew Barrett from Greenville, South Carolina. What makes him amazing? What is life's greatest blessing? And when he shared what is the best yet to come, his wife's pregnant. They're having their second baby.
Oh,
So you get people to then, because I came from a place of darkness in such great loss and sorrow and pain, for people to focus on, even though maybe life's hard. You know what? I'm awesome. I love myself. You focus on what you're grateful in life and what is beautiful to come.
I just have one last question because I this is beautiful ending. What do you find extraordinary in every day?
Wow. In everything. My faith journey has been such a roller coaster at times. And when you can find that place to where you don't have the peaks and valleys in your faith and you're always at the peak, I just have a tendency to find the goodness in it. Yeah. My soon to be wife walked in. She has been gone visiting someone at the hospital, and she didn't know I was on this. So yeah. And again, I was taught. I was taught that by Maddie. My job is not to judge you. Someone else, that higher power, will do that. So for today, it's just to bring you love. Because when you can't find that place again, I've learned a handful of simple things, and one of them too is your perception is your reality. And that to you is your truth, and it may be far from it. So therefore then, if you can disconnect, and the beautiful thing is, those like Maddie, a lot of times dogs have this infinite love, okay,
Unconditional, I will say. Unconditional love. I'm a dog person.
that teach us that too, if you so choose it. But again, that's what I try to really impress upon people, and when I speak and when I navigate that entire scene, is just coming back to this place where we are right now, where we're kind of putting a button on it, in which, when I say be the reason someone smiles today, it's so simple, but it is a choice. And for me, it wasn't natural at one point in time, because in life was hard, and I hated life to where I wanted to check out. So that impacts your relationships personally and professionally. But if you can find that reason to be grateful, to love, to smile, it then becomes insanely natural that I can't navigate moving around town without people feeling something. So that I would impress upon people is to find that place. So yeah, even though I do have views on things, if I'm on social media, I just keep moving. If someone's being an asshat, I don't engage because I know that that could emotionally drain me. And that's okay. And it's okay, maybe they think that way or they have whatever position or where they are in life. It's not my responsibility to judge them.
Thank you, Marvel, for this profound conversation. Learned a lot. Thanks for sharing your vision. I hope you make everybody smile, more and more people throughout the world. You make it a truly better place.
Well, I'll end kind of how I started, and I mean this when I say this. Thank you. I'm grateful because it is a two-way street, and again, in wanting to touch the life of a singular person, it starts with you and wanting you, bring me into your world. So I am grateful for this time today. Thank you. It means a lot.